honestly does anything like this. So we're just happy and proud to be doing that.
Totally. Yeah, you should be. I think that's so cool. Like I don't know, that's a great experience and you're learning so much.
Mhm.
When's the AP test?
Oh, the AP test is May 13th, I
Oh
believe.
God,
So we still got some time, but like
not enough.
not enough time. But you know how it is with the
Yeah.
AP. You sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you study and it's like, oh, that was not what I was studied. Because you have to look through the wide range of everything, which is the problem. But
Mhm.
I don't know. I prefer like a verbal test to be honest, because like it's one thing to like talk and it's another thing to like write down your answers and everything. I
Yeah,
don't know.
absolutely.
But you'd know about that, huh?
Yeah, no, I love the yapping. I love yapping. So I'm really happy I'm able to like host and everything. So
Great.
extra yap time, yeah.
And I appreciate you doing so. No, and I like that you said, I think it's around May 13th. I think you know exactly when it is. You got
Oh
that.
yeah.
Yeah, you're trying to be casual with it, but yeah,
Mhm. Yeah, no, with all the APs, it's just like you just have to
yeah.
be looked in for those. I don't
Oh,
know.
it is the 13th. What the
It
hell?
is? Oh my
Yeah.
God. AP Psych is what, the 17th, 18th? Or do
I
you
think
not
it's
AP
like
Psych?
I am an AP Psych.
Oh
I
yeah,
think
you
it's
are.
like
It's our
the
last
I
test.
think it's the very last test that they're doing, like
The
around
19th or something,
yeah.
yeah.
No, it's yeah, the 19th or some shit.
Yeah, something like that, which is insane. I don't know. Is that all the APs you have? AP Lang
IP
too, right?
Lang.
How's that going?
It's I mean it's going. I did really good on my
Here, get in
listening
frame,
skills.
get in frame.
I was gonna say here.
I was out of frame because I was eating food. Sorry.
Yes.
Right.
We
That's
have a little bit of a great assortment of food.
oh, very nice.
So yeah, thank you to our district for that.
That's
Do you have
perfect.
any social media? Are you guys on like TikTok or anything?
Uh,
Uh-oh.
actually, yes. Well, I mean, I'm not, but yeah,
Mhm.
got a slide at the end of the presentation as well for like what our social media is.
Is it report to the cloud or the computer?
Cloud.
But yeah, like because we run our TikTok, we run like the social media teams, and it's like it's been a lot of fun, especially with our TikTok.
That's
We got
awesome.
we got like a lot of staff and students to be like, go NBTI. So that was probably our highlight video, I think.
Was it going NB what
Yeah, he
CI?
said NBCI, but it's okay. It's same thing. It's all right. It's okay. It was
Yeah,
an English teacher, so
yeah,
So funny.
it's kind of funny that he made the mistake.
yeah.
But
Words don't
we're gonna
matter.
start letting everybody
Oh,
else
awesome.
in. Should we migrate to that soon enough? I think as soon as they're done, we can migrate to that room. Because we don't want to like have any feedback or anything like that. Okay, yes. Did you start? You started it?
Did we start it?
Where is that button?
We might have accidentally started it like way earlier.
Do you think it is? No, but this is attendees. Oh no, so they're all here.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
All
they've
right,
just
well,
heard us
yes, they've
yapping
heard
on
us
accident.
yapping. Well, yes, welcome in everybody who's here to see this webinar today. And yeah, we're very excited to have you guys here. And I guess we'll just wait till right at 12 and then you can begin.
Awesome.
And we'll give you a fancy introduction and everything.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you.
And yes, everybody that's in everybody, if you have any questions, please feel free to put into the Q&A and we will get to your questions. All right. We're down to 1 minute.
All right.
11:59. Okay, we can begin a little bit sooner. So today we've got Brian O'Neill. Woo! Let's give it up for him. Yeah. So yes, whenever you're ready to begin, we're ready to listen.
All right. Let me start the presentation. Give me 1 second. You should be able to see the presentation.
Yep, we see it.
Awesome. Let me get into presenter mode. So yes, really excited to be here, really appreciative for this opportunity to be able to present to you to talk about plastic pollution in the Great Lakes and what we can do about it. I am here from the Alliance for the Great Lakes. My name is Brian O'Neill. I'm an Alliance ambassador, which means I'm a volunteer. I get to come around and do cool presentations to people like you. But the Alliance is a really big organization. We're going to talk about that a little bit. It does a lot of really great work. So it's really an honor to both to be an ambassador and to be able to talk to people who are interested in protecting this incredible natural resource. So what we're going to talk about today, three things. We're going to talk a little bit about the importance of the Great Lakes. We all know what they are. We all see them on the maps. You know, if people live in the area, you've been to them to go swimming or boating. But, you know, just the incredible majesty of them is something we really want to talk about and the importance for them. We'll talk a little bit about the work that we do at the Alliance for the Great Lakes, but mostly what we're going to talk about is plastic pollution in the Great Lakes. We're going to talk about how much is out there, and it's really kind of a staggering amount. Talk about what happens to the plastic, how long it's there, what happens when it's in the water, what the impacts are, how it's going to affect all of us, and how it has been affecting us. And also, I think kind of most importantly, the actions that we can take both as individuals, as communities, and kind of as a broader society as a whole. So yeah, the importance of the Great Lakes. Now, we all see them on maps. We see how big they are. We know how huge they are when we're actually on the shore. We can kind of look at it. And, you get a sense of how big they are, but you don't really have a sense of how important they are just standing by the shore. But what's really interesting is the lakes hold the most surface freshwater in the world. This is the biggest source of freshwater, of drinking water anywhere in the world. It is this enormous treasure. It holds up to 5,500 cubic miles of freshwater. I read somewhere once that if you covered the continental United States with the water from the Great Lakes, it'd be about a foot high of water. I don't think that's an experiment we should try. We'll just take their word for it. But it's just a staggering amount of water. That's 90% of North America's supply. And we provide drinking water to over 1 in 10 Americans, which is 40 million people, and 1 in 4 Canadians. It's just astonishing. One thing I always think about, a lot of us I know are in the Chicagoland area. If you're downtown standing at the shore of Lake Michigan, you see the very bottom tip of Lake Michigan, and that's just a little bit, and it's a huge amount of water just right there. And it's the bottom tip of this enormous ecosystem that stretches all the way up to Canada, goes as far as New York, goes as far, super far north. And just this little tiny bit of water that you can see visually is enough to change the destiny of a lot of countries. There's a lot of places that don't have this resource, including in America itself. So this is something that's super important that we really want to make sure that we conserve. It's just an incredibly important resource. But there's not a lot of it. So I'm going to play this video, and let me know if the sound works. If you can, if our host can let me know.
It's
It's
covered
only a
in
couple
water.
minutes. Are you able to hear the sound?
Demonstrate how water is distributed on Earth. This
Yeah, we can hear
Yeah,
it.
we can hear you.
water represents all of the water on Earth. Of this water, 97% is in the oceans, which is almost all of this water. 2% of the total water on Earth is frozen in glaciers and ice caps. So I will take that amount out. 1% of the total water on Earth is freshwater, which is what humans use for drinking, watering crops, and other everyday activities. So I will take that out. As you can see, most of the water, 97%, is salt water, 2% is frozen, and a small amount, 1%, is fresh water. 29% of the fresh water on Earth is underground, and about 70% is frozen in glaciers. Less than 1% of the world's fresh water is surface freshwater, like rivers and lakes. In this demonstration, this tiny drop represents the Great Lakes. The Great Lakes contain 20% of the world's surface freshwater and about 90% of North America's. They hold 6 quadrillion gallons of water. Wow, the Great Lakes are very big, but they are not bottomless. Freshwater is a precious resource, and we must work to conserve and protect it from pollution. I want you to think about all the ways you use water and why the Great Lakes are important to you, because the Great Lakes are so great.
It's true. They are so great. And I think that's a really kind of incredible message. Like when you look at a map of the world, or you look at something and you hear the phrase "it's a blue planet," and that's really true. But there is so little fresh drinking water. And I know our hosts are in Elgin. Most of your drinking water comes from either underground aquifers. There's a couple layers of them, and from the Fox River watershed. So what we see here is the lakes are an incredible resource, but they're also not. They don't provide water for everyone. They provide water for people who are really close to the lakes in what we call the Great Lakes Basin. And there's a lot of discussion around that. That's something we can talk about a little later when we talk about drinking water. But yeah, they are just this incredibly important resource, and not just for people either. There are over 3,500 different species of animals that live around the Great Lakes. And you can see just a very small portion of them here. You've got beautiful birds, you've got little amphibians, you've got all sorts of great flowers, all sorts of plants. The lakes aren't just for us, and we think it's really important to understand that while the lakes are one of our incredible resources, they're also home to so many different kinds of animals and plants. And I think that's something that we really need to keep in mind when we think about plastic pollution in the Great Lakes, because we definitely, we'll talk about it in our drinking water, but every single species around the Great Lakes relies on either the water from the lakes or the water from the rivers that pour into it that make up the Great Lakes watershed. So that's something, animals aren't just nice. They're their own living creatures. They're their own beautiful individual species, and they're something that we need to protect when we think about what we're going to do with the lakes. So we have a little bit of a fun game here. It's can you match the organism to its name? We're going to run through a couple of these. This is obviously just a very, very small percentage of the 3,500 some species that are in the Great Lakes. You've got, sturgeons, mussels, crayfish, bugs, water striders, everything that's kind of cool around there. So yeah, take a minute, kind of see if you can match them up if you're in a class or if you're individual. And we'll start with just a couple questions before we show them all. So I guess the first one that we want to look at is what's this? Let's see. Can anyone guess what kind of bird that is?
Pippin clover,
That is an excellent guess.
assuming.
Correct. Well, let's not even say guess. I would say that's a knowledgeable answer. Yeah, those are really cool birds. They're pretty small. They're really nice. So the next one we want to do, this one. What is this? All right.
I'm gonna take a guess. Fingernail clam?
It is actually the quagga mussel. And that the quagga mussel is what they call an invasive species. It's not native to the area. It was brought in on the giant freighter ships, which would take water in for their ballast and overseas and especially in the Black Sea in Europe, and they'd come here and they'd dump the water into the lakes, and now all these mussels are here. And there are an enormous amount of mussels in the lakes. They've kind of taken over a lot of the ecosystem. It's pretty dangerous. They're not the most dangerous invasive species, but there are so many of them. They say that if you were to walk on the bottom of Lake Michigan, you wouldn't ever actually touch the bottom. You'd be walking on mussel shells the entire time, from the tip of Chicago all the way north to the Straits of Mackinac. The entire walk would be covered with mussels. I would recommend against that, like your feet would get cut. There's also nothing to breathe, so don't try that. But that just shows how incredibly amount of quagga mussels there are. So the next one, and we're only going to do like 3 or 4 of these. We've got this pretty little plant. I don't know if there's anything in the chats coming in. Or... All right.
Milkweed.
That is it. It is the milkweed, which is both a pretty and ugly name at the same time. So last one we'll do this beautiful fish. Any guesses on this one?
Wait, which one? Sorry, the fish? Fish?
Yeah, it's this circled fish.
Take a guess. What do you think?
I don't know.
Well, I don't know. No, whitefish?
That is it. It is the whitefish.
Yeah.
That's very, very good eating. A lot of Midwest recipes revolve around whitefish. They're really good in tacos as well. Just kind of a classic Midwest staple. The other fish that we don't want to eat is the sturgeon. And so, yeah, they'll kind of show all of these. The lake sturgeon is really cool. The lake sturgeon has been in the lakes for 10,000 years. It's one of the oldest species in the lakes. Sturgeon themselves are hundreds of millions of years old. They can get to as much as like 300 pounds. Like, these are enormous fish. They're also pretty endangered right now, especially in the lakes. So would not recommend fishing for them and eating. They're really important in a lot of native traditions, especially like Huron and Anishinaabeg. These are very important fish, and there's something that really needs to be protected. And they're just like these ancient fish that are, kind of all over the world in our Great Lakes. Just another example of how diverse and how beautiful and how sometimes kind of strange the lakes can actually be. Like the sturgeon, pretty much all the lakes have their like lake monsters that they talk about, and most of them tend to be sturgeons because they can live up to 100 years and grow up to 300 pounds. Just really, really cool fish. If you like fish. All right, so that's some of the importance of the Great Lakes. Now let's talk a little bit about who we are just for a minute. We are the Alliance for the Great Lakes. We have kind of a long mission statement here. We're going to protect, conserve, and restore the Great Lakes to ensure healthy water for the people and communities for generations of people and wildlife. What we really want to make sure that we do is we are advocates. We support policies that support the lakes and communities, and we listen to everyone. We build research, we do analysis, we have partnerships with governments, with non-governmental organizations, with community groups, and also education, like doing presentations like this, which is really one of the best parts of it. Just kind of getting people to be more interested and to know about this incredible system of lakes we have. So our work, we envision these two kind of really broadly positive outcomes for the people in the lakes, that we can safely enjoy and rely on all the benefits lakes have to offer, from, safe, affordable drinking water to recreation like swimming, boating, and fishing. The lakes are living things. They're for us to enjoy. Boating, swimming, and fishing, those kind of things are really important. They're important now. They've been important for, fishing's been important for tens of thousands of years in the area. And they're just supposed to be fun. This is something that we can also enjoy while protecting. But part of that is making sure that every community that depends on the lakes is heard and included in the decisions that affect the lakes and their community. And so that doesn't just mean, listening to the most powerful people, listening to the politicians, listening to, the kind of rich people who live along some of the lake shores. They often have the strongest voices, the loudest voices, but they're not always the most important ones. They're often not. Like, there's a lot of communities. There are so many communities around here that depend on the lakes. And at the Alliance, we want to make sure that we are able to give them voice. And there are so many great community groups that do incredible work, that understand the needs of their communities, especially, communities with lower income, communities with infrastructure that's been kind of neglected, so their drinking water isn't safe. They do incredible work, and we want to help amplify that. We want to listen to them and help amplify their message when we're talking to people who can make decisions that impact so many people. Kind of three connected approaches: advocacy and leadership. We have people in Washington, we have people in all of the state capitals and in the provincial capitals in Canada. Education and action, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Education, stuff like this, all sorts of community groups. Also, you can see a picture there. This is a great picture of beach cleanups. Those are always fun to do. And also research and analysis. We have really, really, really smart people who are doing all this work, doing all this research to show both the interconnectedness and how policy can impact the Great Lakes in a positive way. We have our Great Lakes federal policy priorities for 2025. Obviously, we are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. We work with the government in order to try to help protect the lakes. So we work on water infrastructure, which we sort of just talked about, which is how the water gets from the lakes or from underground aquifers into our taps. And that's really important. There's a lot of pollution there. There's a lot of lead pipes that can, have harmful effects on people who are drinking the water. Agriculture. What is the best way to balance the needs of agriculture? Because we all need food, with making sure that harmful materials like phosphorus and stuff don't get into the lakes. That's a big problem, especially around like Lake Erie, which almost every year has a big algae bloom due to phosphorus and other really important agricultural fertilizers pouring into the lakes, and it renders the water undrinkable a lot of times. And that's really, so we have to balance, obviously, the need for food, but the need for clean drinking water too. We talked a little about the quagga mussels. We make sure we want to keep invasive species out of the lakes. It's not just a matter of we want to build a wall for these invasive species, but we want to make sure, because a lot of times when they get in, it disrupts the ecosystem. They have different food chains. They don't have natural predators, and they kind of disrupt the entire food chain. The Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. For too long, there was a ton of pollution around the Great Lakes. Industry was built around the lakes. You see this all around, especially like Lake Erie, parts of Lake Ontario, Lake Michigan. All of them have these big industries, big polluters. And so the Great Lakes Restoration is, how do we clean up and rebuild for people and for the environment? And that's something that requires a lot of money and a lot of funding, and we make sure that that gets done every year. And then plastic pollution, which is what we're going to talk about today. This is a really big thing for us. And yeah, we really want to make sure that we understand the nature of plastic pollution, how dangerous it is, and most important, like what we can do about it. All right, plastic pollution. How much is out there? This is just an example of a picture taken from one of the beach cleanups. We'll talk about that a little bit more, about the nature of the plastic that's actually on the beach. You can see here in this picture all sorts of bottle caps, all sorts of chapstick things, and just kind of unidentifiable plastic waste, and it's everywhere. So over 22 million pounds of plastic enters the Great Lake each year. That's just a staggering amount, 22 million pounds. The question that's on this slide is, what is, if you think of 22 million pounds, it's hard to kind of conceptualize that. What is the equivalent weight of how many African elephants? And I mean, that's a tough question. I don't know how many African elephants you can think of in your mind. Myself, I can maybe get 20 elephants in my head at once, but it's more than that. So when you think of how much plastic into the lakes every year, what is the equivalent weight? Can we can get some guesses in the chat, or like how many elephants worth of plastic do you think enters the lake each year? Kimberly Strack says 400 in the chat. It's a good guess. All right.
Like around 1,000.
2,316. So I guess if you can imagine 2,300 elephants walking to the lake and then suddenly becoming plastic, which is not like a really nice image, but if you can imagine that, that's how much. And so much of it is this tiny little pieces of plastic. And that just kind of speaks to the scope of the problem that we have, is that there's just this incredible, enormous amount of plastic getting into our drinking water, getting to the rivers that flow, that create the Great Lakes water basin, and it's just everywhere. We have a little map here of that's Lake Erie, just how much water, how much plastic and the way it kind of swirls around. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we move forward. So at the Alliance, we've been doing these beach cleanups for decades, and we've come up with a lot of data. Every year when you do a beach cleanup, which we'll talk about in a little bit, like you measure how much plastic, how much waste you pick up. So we have analysis of over 20 years as well as suggested action. If you want to go to this site, Litter Data, it can really break down like all of it, everything that is going into the lakes. Obviously we're picking up stuff from the beach, and that's not necessarily, exactly what's in the lakes, but it's pretty indicative of what is actually in there if you look at what's on the beach. So where does this come from? General observations. The litter's there because we leave it there. And that seems like a very banal observation, but that's what happens. If you look at like the oceanic garbage systems, the enormous plastic whirlpools that are in the ocean, a lot of that stuff comes from rivers. A lot of that stuff, kind of flows into the ocean, and it gets there through a million different channels. The lakes is there because people go to the beach and they just leave plastic on the beach. They play with a toy and want to stop playing with it. They have a soda and they throw the cap down. They're drinking water. A lot of it is cigarette butts or cigar butts or vape pens, something like that. People just throw it on the ground, and it's not even always intentional. You might blow away. Another big thing is that garbage cans in lake, even if you're really conscientious and put it in a garbage can, it gets really windy. Those things get knocked over. And so, there are ways to try to ameliorate that, but they're just people just leave stuff on the lakes, on the beaches, and that's how it gets in there. It's kind of all in the community. Like it is our litter, and it's not coming from really far away. And as we saw in the Lake Erie one, it circles around, so it might get onto your beach from the other side of the lake, but it's still all of our community litter. A lot of the items we find are very, very, very tiny, and I think that kind of speaks to part of the problem is that if you have a bottle cap and the garbage can is like so far away, it's pretty easy to be like, oh, okay, I'll set it down here. It's fine. Look at how big this beach is. But everyone does that, and then you have 2,000 elephants a year worth of those things. We also find a lot of single-use items, and most of them are plastic. Single-use can be everything from the water bottle that the volunteer below is picking up in the picture there, or utensils. You bring a picnic to the beach and you have these utensils and the fork blows away, or you just kind of set it down and you forget about it when you run into the water. So it's all these single-use plastics that are really kind of one of the key drivers of plastic pollution in the Great Lakes. So these are kind of the top 10 items that we've collected over the last 10 years. Obviously, we have a lot of different data over 20 years, but this is the last 10 years. The number one by far is plastic pieces. Also, a lot of cigarette butts, foam pieces, bottle caps, those are also plastic. Food wrappers are an enormous amount. Glass pieces, people break a glass while they're there and they don't think to clean it up, which is both really a source of pollution, but also really dangerous. Straws and stirs and all sorts of also like metal bottle caps. We put tiny trash in there in 2014 because we realized as we were kind of moving forward that this is the majority of things that people are picking up. This is just another visualization of it. Tiny trash is actually 40% of the amount of waste that we find. It's these tiny, tiny little pieces. And they're just everywhere. And we're going to talk in a minute about why those are so dangerous. Food-related items, again, yeah, you bring food to the beach and the stuff gets away from you, or you try to throw it away, but the garbage can's full. So, you just kind of set it on top and pretend that it's going to be fine. People do that all the time. You kind of have a Jenga of trash on top of a full garbage can, especially in the summer. And the stuff just gets away from you. A bag of chips that, just blows away. Smoking related stuff is incredible amount, is 22% of people having a cigarette and just putting it out and putting it into the sand or flicking it away or anything like that, which is, really kind of terrible on a lot of different levels. So that is the kind of litter that we find, and that is the litter that is everywhere along the lakes, along the beaches, and so much of it is plastic. 86%, in fact, is plastic of everything that we find. And plastic is really, really dangerous, as we're going to talk about in a minute here. But every year, the huge majority of it is plastic, 86%. And a lot of it is in these small, small pieces. And the small pieces are really dangerous because you don't pick that up. If you see a bottle lying on the beach, you might pick it up. You see a water bottle, you're like, I'm going to pick this up and throw it away. But so much of it is buried under the sand, is just on the surface, hard to discern from a small rock. But this is the stuff that gets into the water. This is the stuff that stays in the water. This is the stuff that's eaten by fish in the water and kind of moves up the food chain. And even if it doesn't move up the food chain, it's bad for that fish. It's bad for whatever it encounters. So it's the tiny stuff that can be really the most dangerous. And that's 40% of it is this tiny trash, which almost 70% of that is plastic pieces. So the tiny stuff is everywhere. And if you do a beach cleanup, and they will have stuff at the end of this presentation to show how you can get involved in that. They start in April this year and kind of go throughout all the year at all the beaches around the Great Lakes. You walk around and you just kind of get a sense of how much trash there actually is out there. So yeah, you can see in this chart, we're picking up hundreds of thousands, million pieces of trash every year of this tiny trash. And yeah, that's for some people the most fun part of a beach cleanup, for some the least, where you're kind of sorting through and counting everything. If you really like sorting through trash, this is definitely something that you'd be interested in. This is just a nice picture of the kind of tiny things that you pick up. I've looked at this picture 100 times. I have no idea what any of that is, but it's stuff that's just broken down, stuff that people have stepped on, stuff that has been there for a long time and has started to biodegrade, but is still existing on the beach. I have no idea what that is, but every single piece there represents danger if it gets into the water. And here's why it's a danger, because what happens to it is a lot of times on a human scale, nothing. Forever, for a very long time, nothing happens to the plastic. When you think about biodegradation, sorry, if you have a banana peel and you drop it on the ground, besides, someone slipping on it in a hilarious pratfall, it's going to go away. There are microbes in the banana peel that are going to eat it up. It doesn't take very long to decompose, and it's not really a pollutant. That's not the same. Obviously, plastic materials don't have these microbes in them. They're synthetic. They're not natural. They don't do that. It takes decomposition via sunlight and air. The sun gets into it, kind of starts to break it down. Air gets, kind of in between the molecules and starts to break apart, which is some of the stuff that we saw with those tiny pieces. But that is not fast at all. And it doesn't happen quickly like it does with the banana peel or anything else that's natural. So we have a couple games here. We have 2 or 3 slides of this. Think of what's the shortest and the longest amount of time to degrade in the environment, and then we're also going to show approximately how long it takes. So please don't do this, but if you were to drop all 4 of these things in the environment, how long would they take to degrade? What do you think? You can put this in the chat if you want, or just think about it, and we'll give the answers in a minute. The thing that's the quickest to degrade versus the longest. So what do we think? Sorry, my dog's barking. So what do we think is the first thing that's going to biodegrade?
The newspaper?
Newspaper is correct. The newspaper takes a month and a half. Not that long. That's, yeah, Linda in the chat said the newspaper, that's correct. And the next one.
Plywood.
Plywood is correct. Plywood takes 1 to 3 years. Again, not that long, but a decently long time to be out there. Now here it starts getting tricky. We've got plastic takeout and plastic lids.
Plastic takeout?
That is correct. How long do we think plastic takeout would take? You know, you get these and you see that we get them a lot. I've got several in my cabinets, myself.
5 to 10 years.
5 to 10?
5 to 10.
Good guess. 50 to 80 years for these.
Oh!
Yeah. And you get these and it says, you know, like they're biodegradable, which is technically true, but it takes a really long time and they degrade into smaller pieces of plastic. So it's not like it's there for 15, 80 years and then it's gone overnight. It'll degrade and break down into these tiny little pieces of plastic that'll just be there for a very long time. And finally, then plastic lids. What do we think on these ones?
100 to 200.
Great guess. 400 years. They're made to be sturdy. I mean, yeah, plastic is a great innovation. It's made to last, but that is also one of the problems with it. All right, next one. Got the banana peels, straws, bottles, and wool socks. Wool socks are a weird one. I've never seen wool socks at the beach. Doesn't usually come up. Don't throw them in the water. So what do we think is first here?
Banana peel.
Banana peel, yep, 2 to 5 weeks. It's natural. You know, an animal might eat it. I'm not saying litter your banana peels, but it's not the worst thing in the world. What's after that?
Wool socks.
Seem to have consensus around wool socks. That is correct. 1 to 5 years. I don't know how many people are throwing their wool socks in the water. Hopefully none, but if like you normally do, now's your cue to stop doing so. Got plastic bottles and plastic straws.
Plastic bottle?
Or strings.
Plastic bottles. You got plastic straw in the chat. It is. Oops. Oh, sorry. I clicked on 2 things. Plastic straws, yeah, 50 to 100 years, and then the plastic bottle is 450 years. So think of how many plastic bottles, you know, we all use. We all use them. Don't have to, but you know, we all do, and they're all around, and it takes 450 years for them to actually decompose. All right, last one. Paper towels, plastic bags, foam cups, and diapers.
Paper towel?
Paper towel is correct. 2 to 4 weeks. Yeah, they're mostly natural. That's, you know, it doesn't take very long. And then when they're gone, they're gone. What do we have next?
Foam cup?
Diaper.
Okay.
It is not the diaper. It is the cup.
See, I was right.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I flicked that up. It's the plastic bag. Sorry, 10 to 20 years.
We did the plastic bags.
All right. So then we have the final race between foam cup and diapers.
So cup?
Got cup. It is the cup. At 50 years. So diapers, how long do we think these last?
100 years.
450 years. There's a lot of elastic in them. There's a lot of different kinds of plastic. There's a lot of different materials. And a lot of these things break down into microplastics, into tiny little pieces that just take forever to fully decompose. So the things that are going in the lakes now, the things that are going in the lake, you know, plastic is 100 years old. You know, we haven't had plastic for that long. And it'll last for, you know, grandkids' lifetime, the stuff that's going in the lakes now. So it's really important to think about cutting it off at the source and think about the impact that this pollution has on the lakes. So one impact that it has, and you know, we definitely want to talk about this, is, you know, you see on the right side of the screen the ocean flow with the plastic pollution in the ocean. It gets caught up in the currents and it goes everywhere. It's super dangerous, super damaging. It's terrible for the ecosystem. It's terrible for the animals there. You know, they talk about like the great trash swirl in the Pacific Ocean, which is, you know, enormous. It's the size of full countries. It's insanely huge, and it does wash up onto beaches and it does pollute. The one slight benefit for humans of the not benefit, but the one thing that's not dangerous for humans about ocean plastic is we don't drink it. Obviously, we drink the water in the Great Lakes. It is the #1 supplier of water in the United States. It is so important. And any plastic that gets into the lakes could eventually end up in our drinking water. What you have there on the bottom right is a picture of microplastics, these tiny little pieces that can slip through filters, that can slip through, you know, the the water purification and when it actually goes into the water systems in around here, these microplastics get everywhere and they're in our blood. I read a study last week that said the average human right now has enough microplastic in their brain to make a plastic spoon, which is a really vivid and terrible image. There's not a spoon-sized piece of plastic in your brain, but there's enough microplastic in there to make one spoon. We don't know what the long-term impacts are. This is really new. We don't know what it means to have all this plastic in your brain or in your blood. It's still really too early to tell. My guess is it's not good. I'm not a scientist, but I don't think that it's probably good to have a utensil's worth of plastic inside your brain. So this is something we need to really think about right now and think, how do we stop this from getting even worse than it already is? Because there's a lot of impacts. There are impacts on people, there are impacts on the community, there are impacts on wildlife. So what are some of these impacts? They threaten everyone. These tiny little pieces of plastic threaten the environment, threaten the wildlife, threaten the communities. They pose so many threats. The next picture is a little bit upsetting, and I apologize for this, but when we talk about wildlife, this is a fish that got caught in fishing wire, and it almost bisected it. And, this is a very dramatic picture of what can happen. And fishing wire, by the way, can last 800 to 1,000 years. Like if you're fishing and you cut the line, fishing line almost never goes away. Like it just is one of those things that is there for, on a human scale, essentially forever. Like we can't even conceive of how long it's there. It's, almost 1,000 years. So, you cut your line when you're fishing and it's going to be there impacting wildlife forever. They can get caught in it, they can get trapped, they can swallow it, they can swallow the plastic. You have a fishing lure with a bird that got hurt by it at the bottom picture. So, the plastic that gets into these animals, not only, these pictures both look just excruciating and heartbreakingly painful, but beyond that, there's more. Like it can impact the way that they reproduce. It can impact the health of their youth. It can impact the way that, the species grow up and evolve. And especially when we're facing other challenges like invasive species, which are, kind of upsetting the balance of the ecosystem in the Great Lakes. Adding all this plastic in to species that there's no natural protection from plastic for the huge majority of species, obviously, it's going to mess up the way that they live. It's going to mess up the food that they eat. It's going to mess things up all the way up the food chain, which, from a selfish level could impact us, which is scary. But even not only that, like these are species that have an inalienable right to live and exist, and we are kind of destroying their ecosystems through plastic. So that is some of the wildlife impacts that we have. Yeah, there was a study a couple years ago, the ingestion of microplastics. These are all pretty small fish. An alewife, 98% of alewives found had ingested plastics, especially these microplastics. Round goby, 97%. The deep water sculpin, 93%. The very unfortunately named slimy sculpin, as 100% of them had microplastics that they had ingested. So it's not a rare thing, obviously. Their plastics are everywhere. Most fish eat by swimming around and opening their mouth and scooping up food. And if the plastic's there, especially the round goby is not going to eat a plastic bottle. It's not going to eat a diaper. You'd have to be the most ambitious round goby that ever lived in order to try that. But they are going to ingest these microplastics. It's just inevitable. They can't help it. And here's a picture. This was taken not in the Great Lakes. National Geographic had something in the ocean, but this is just a tiny little piece of water, a tiny little drop of water with a little fish in it, and the amount of plastics that it's swimming around that are just everywhere. So it's almost inevitable that they're going to ingest these. They're going to be hurt by them, and it's really sad. And these are important creatures in their own right. They're also key parts of the ecosystem that help keep everything in balance in our lives as well. So when we think about the human impacts, there are a lot. Like we said, so many of us get our water from the Great Lakes. And even if you're outside the Great Lakes Basin and you're getting your water from the Fox River is not immune to microplastics either. The aquifers, in DeKalb County, are not immune to plastic pollution, especially, I don't want to get too into the weeds here, but I don't know if y'all have heard the story of the Chicago River being reversed, about like 100 and some years ago. So the Chicago River used to flow into Lake Michigan, but that we decided that it was bringing too much pollutants into the river and into the lake because Chicago is super polluted. So building a series of dams and locks, the river now flows backwards and the lake flows into the river. And that goes into eventually the Illinois River and then to the Mississippi. And the Fox River is part of the Mississippi basin. The Fox River, where a lot of you get your water from, flows into the Illinois. And so all these rivers and lakes are now connected. Naturally, they weren't. Like at the edge of the Great Lakes Basin, if you were to have a drop of water uninterrupted, it would flow into Lake Michigan. And if you're just on the other side, it would eventually get to the Mississippi through like, the Fox River, for example. So this is all connected. There are plastics, microplastics in the rivers, in the aquifers, in the Great Lakes, in all the water we drink. So yeah, you look at these really nice, clean, crisp bottles of water, it looks delicious. You're thirsty, that looks like a nice cold bottle of water. But there's probably microplastics inside those bottles because it gets everywhere. And those bottles themselves could potentially contribute to the rise of microplastics in the water. It's not just for your drinking, for your cleaning, for cooking, for everything, for the fish that we eat. If it's in the fish that we eat, it's going to be in our bodies. And the human impacts kind of go even further than that. If the lake ecosystems are destroyed by plastics hurting the species that are existing there and not really able to produce in the way that they used to, fishing gets destroyed. Our recreation can get destroyed. Like the things that we enjoy about the lake can get destroyed. It's really detrimental to our health, but it's also hugely detrimental to the way we enjoy the lakes. And part of that is the community impacts. I mean, you go on the beach and the beach is polluted, you're not going to want to be there. Who wants to hang out right there? That looks really gross. I don't want to hang out there. I want to hang out on a clean beach. So it impacts your livelihood. I mean, it impacts your life. It impacts the way that you want to interact with the lake. And it impacts the communities that might depend on tourism. So many communities depend on recreation, people going as tourists, people going boating, people going fishing. A lot of people's livelihoods depend on clean, healthy lakes. And so when they're not, these communities can be destroyed. These communities can have serious, environmental harm and serious economic harm as well. And so all these little things like that pollution on the lake, the pollution in the beach that we see right here, that can go a long way to destroying a community. And it can go a long way to destroying the way that you view your community. If your community is dirty and polluted, it doesn't feel the same. It doesn't feel like home. A clean beach that's free of plastic pollution is something that people can actually enjoy and be proud of. And I think one thing, and this is not necessarily my own hypothesis, but thinking about it, like if you care about the lake, if you go to the beach and you see that it's super polluted, there's already a sense of, well, what more can I do? You don't see the lake in the same way. You see the lake as this place that's covered in trash, as not hospitable, as not enjoyable. And that has sort of a, so to speak, downstream effect of the way that we think about the lakes. If it already seems like something that's gross, the need to protect it kind of lowers, or the will to protect it, because you don't think of it as this beautiful thing. You think of it as this kind of trash area that I just don't want to go to. So there are a lot of impacts of plastic pollution on the wildlife, on us as individuals, and as us as communities. So that's grim, and I apologize for how grim that is. But hope is not lost. There are actions that you can take. One of the first things is collection, and collection comes in a lot of different ways. In the lower right-hand corner, we see people cleaning up the beach, picking up that gross piece of trash that looks like, I don't know, lighter fluid or something. I don't know what that is. This looks like, possibly in Chicago, people cleaning it up. So that's a big, important part of collection. That's something that you can do as individuals, as communities, as classrooms. But there's a lot that you can also do as a society. Like in the top right corner, we see these sewer grates. Trash in the street eventually flows down into the gutters, into the sewers, and gets into the water system. And so even these grates here, which allow for water and some biological material to slide through, they stop plastic and they make it easier to clean up. Because once the plastic's in the system, it becomes much more harder, much more expensive to clean up, much more expensive to get out. So even little things like this, where, you might never pay attention to a sewer grate, you might never, you might just walk on by, but it makes a big difference. We see in the top left these nets, of these kind of X-flow nets, which are collecting garbage as water is moving from one system into the lakes. So those are really great things. Those two things are things that you can petition your community to do. You can, ask the government. You can go to town hall meetings and say, hey, we need this. These are low cost, high impact ways that communities and governments and political organizations can really make a difference here. At the bottom is a something you put in your laundry machine. I don't have one of these, but it actually collects a lot of plastic, collects a lot of waste before the washing machine pours the water back out. So that's something that's really important because a lot of stuff does get through just from washing. You have something in your pockets, you have something, synthetic materials in your clothes that kind of degrade a little bit in the washing machine. This can actually catch them. So there are things that you can do as individuals, and there are things we can do as more broad society. I talked earlier about the importance of just cleaning up. Obviously, you see like two recycling things there. Recycling is hugely important. Sometimes the system doesn't always work, but it works much better than throwing things away. So always make sure to recycle. That's the biggest cliche, but it's a cliche because it's been true for a consistently long time. And what we see at the top is, I hope you're sitting down here, a garbage can. But there's a twist. You see at the front, there's like a little latch right there on the front. And those are things that if you have those at beaches and it blows over, not everything falls out and blows around. Like it's little things like that, like communities along the beaches, along the river and the parks and stuff, having these latches. And it takes an extra 1 second to throw something away, but it makes a huge difference because people might throw something away of their own trash. But if these blow over and it gets knocked down, there's like a weird human psychological barrier to picking up someone else's garbage. Once it gets blown away, you're like, this is someone else's problem, not mine. So even just little things like a latch on a public garbage can make a huge difference to stopping pollution from getting there in the first place. Also source reduction, you order out and it says, do you want plastic utensils with that? There's usually like a little button you can click. Say no unless you're in some remote cabin with nothing at all. But I don't know how you'd be ordering food from there. But you probably have a fork at home. You probably have a spoon at home that you can use. Yeah, it's easier to just throw it away than clean it, but not really that much easier. Other city councils passed, straw by request policies to cut down on plastic waste. They don't just throw a straw in. I mean, I don't know how many times, you get something from McDonald's and they throw in like 3 straws because it's easier to grab, they just grab a few. So you have to request a straw if you want it. It's little stuff like that, and that seems like, oh, well, that's so small. But when you think about how much we each throw away, like, if everyone, that throws away 1 fork a day, like that adds up so quickly. Every little thing doesn't seem like it's a lot, but they add up, and it just grows so much. What we're doing at the Alliance for the Great Lakes as part of our policy priority to stop plastic pollution is we want to make plastic waste producers responsible for its production. I talked about the sewer grates, I talked about the X-flow nets. Those aren't super expensive, but they do cost money. And communities don't always have that money, especially lower income communities, which are really disproportionately harmed by pollution, who don't always have the resources to clean up. So make plastic producers responsible for that. If you are making enormous amounts of money producing plastic, you need to have your share of helping to prevent the problems from it too. We also want to reduce the federal government's use of single-use plastics, including polystyrene foam, which is used in a lot of things. There are alternatives to that. The government is a huge user of single-use plastic, so if we can reduce that, that makes a difference. But also fund additional research on the public health impacts of plastic. We talked earlier about having a spoon-sized amount of plastic in your brain. Like, we should know what that does. I mean, I know the ultimate finding is going to be, bad, but we want to know just how bad, and we want to know what we can do, and we want to know what we can do if for this growing problem, not just how we can stop it, but how we can help people who are already impacted by it, which is pretty much all of us. So we urge Congress to pass legislation that does all of this. There's also Fund Adopt a Beach. And this is something that you can do in your classes, and you can do with your friends. I'll talk about how to sign up for that in a minute. Like, you can do Adopt a Beach. You can clean beaches up all over the Great Lakes, which is really exciting. You can write letters to your congresspeople, both federal and state. State actually has an enormous amount of impact. They get a lot fewer letters. They get a lot fewer calls. So actually talking to your state representative, you can usually actually talk to face, in meetings and stuff. They're usually a lot more accessible. They're a lot more prone to be able to be influenced by the voices of their constituents. We also have, there's 9 tips for living with less plastic, like bring your own bag, carry a reusable water bottle or like your own cup. Skip the plastic produce bags, bring your bags to that. Don't always, just kind of grab something and throw it away. There's a lot of different things you can do. We have there's a website there, lessplastic.co.uk, but also on our website at the Alliance, which we'll show some links in a minute. There's a plastic-free Great Lakes pledge, which can show you how you can individually reduce your use of plastic. Yeah, if you go to greatlakes.org/plastic free, you're going to get this toolkit to make a difference for yourself and in the community. And this is stuff that teachers can use, students can use. We're talking about policies and individual use. So this is kind of a great toolkit to use if you're interested in how you can actually work as an individual and as a member of your society to lower the amount of plastic in the Great Lakes. Yeah, or adoptgreatlakes.org. This is where you can do a beach cleanup. You can see that there's all these everywhere, all around, in Canada and the United States. And they're really cool. They're fun. And there's like, this is our litter monitoring form. You write, oh my gosh, I found, 13 glass bottles. And it actually becomes kind of fun. It almost becomes like a bit of a competition. And once you really start doing it, you recognize just how much stuff there is. And it feels really good to pick it up and to say like, oh yeah, this beach is clean because I was part of something. And so I think that's something, that we can do as individuals. And picking up one piece of plastic, picking up 100 pieces of plastic, picking up, 500, it might not seem like much given the, thousands of elephants every year, but it is. It does make a difference. And there are things that we can do both to reduce the waste before it gets to the beaches, before it gets to our water systems, and once it's already there to stop it from being even worse. The spring kickoff for the beach cleanups are going to be April 25th to 27th, but they go all year. You can join one of that's already established. There are a lot of open ones, or you can start one of your own. We also have K through 12 curriculum and lesson plans for students of all ages to just learn more about the Great Lakes in your world and just learn about how cool they are. Because I don't know, we've talked a lot about, the dangers of them and the importance of them, but they're just cool. They're beautiful. They're these, one of the most important ecosystems in North America and the entire world. They're gorgeous, whether you're Lake Superior, seeing the high cliffs of that, or I don't know, there's beauty, like there's just enormous beauty like on the shores of Lake Ontario. It's amazing what's all around there. There's also online advocacy. You can petition Congress, and there's a lot going on right now, but Congress people want to hear from you. The Great Lakes are important. And honestly, the Great Lakes are one of the few bipartisan areas of agreement throughout the years. People from both sides of the aisle think that, oh yeah, we probably need to have these work because they are super important. You can be the most big-hearted environmentalist or the most hard-hearted, capitalist, but you're like, these are important for everything. These are important for our economy, for our future. They're just important to look at. Like you go to the shores of Lake Michigan, when the sun is setting or, when the sun is rising over it or setting behind you and reflecting on it. And it's just gorgeous. It's just something that we want to protect. It's something we want to keep plastics out of so that we can keep enjoying it for ourselves, for generations to come. Got a few, oh, sorry, we're not, I know we talked earlier before this, if we're on TikTok, I guess we're not. We're all very old there. But we are on Facebook, X, and Instagram. So yeah, just if you want to follow us at all, we would love that. We always have little tips like, here's something you can write to your congressperson. Here's just an action you can take. Here is a way to talk to your friends about the Great Lakes and what they can do. So we've got a lot of great material all over the place at the Alliance. And that is it. That's all I have. So I don't know if there were any questions or anything you wanted to talk about, but I really, really appreciate the time.
Wow, thank you so much for your informative and wonderful presentation. In fact, let's just all give it up for Mr. Brian O'Neill right now.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
That was wonderful. So before we head into our questions and our Q&A, we have some of our own questions that we'd like to ask. So how do you believe we can combat this issue with reference that some people just don't care?
I think that's a great question. And when you think of it big, like I would want to protect the Great Lakes, there are people like the Great Lakes, they're huge, they're enormous. Why do I care about that? They'll be fine. I think there's stuff that impacts everyone. Like, I've done some like events, like tabling events, and what I will usually do is, if someone stops by there and be like, oh, so, you go out on the lakes? And he's like, oh yeah, I have a boat. I love going out on the Great Lakes as a boat. I love fishing. And be like, oh, well, the fish stocks are going to be destroyed if we don't stop these invasive species, if we let them in. Like your fishing stock is going to be destroyed. The waters is going to be gross. You don't want to go swimming in that. Or talk about, their importance to the economy. These are, not just pretty, but they're huge economic drivers in the Midwest, in the, so-called Rust Belt, and really for the entire country. There's something that everyone can relate to. You don't have to say we need to save the Great Lakes. You can say we need to protect the economy that drives the state of Ohio, something like that. So you meet people where they live. And I think that's something that is a problem that some activists has. If we want to bring people to us, we want to say, you need to understand what I'm saying, because, it's true. We need to protect the lakes, but you also need to meet people where they live and their concerns. And the lakes are so big and important in every aspect of our lives that at some point you'll be able to find something that they would care about. Even to say, hey, you've got plastic in your brain, not as an insult, as an actual, telling them that this is something that everyone has in their brains right now. So let's try to reduce that.
Yes, certainly. Thank you so much for answering our question. You know what? Interestingly enough, in our class, we did actually write letters to legislation and representatives from within our state. And to go off that, if if they don't take any action, what further action do you think we as students can do to advocate this issue and bring awareness?
I mean, I think the last part of your question kind of answered it. Like, you talk to people in your communities. People will listen to, one person, but that's one person. They might get a letter, but that's one letter. And that's really important. But the more people you talk to, there's more of a groundswell. And just the more people that you educate and raise awareness for, then they talk to people. And they're like, oh my gosh, did you hear about this plastic spoon in my brain? And then, the more people that actually understand that, then the more action that can be taken. That actually does begin to translate into political action. Because a lot of politicians, as cynical as one might be, they, even just for their job security, they have to at some point respond to the concerns of the local community. And it starts small, like, in Elgin, not that Elgin's a small town, but I mean, you can actually go to the town hall meetings and talk to people and talk to representatives. And once, a lot of towns kind of start to do something, then it becomes a regional issue, and regional issues become broader national issues. And that's really how it starts.
Great, thank you so much for answering our questions. Now we're going to move towards the Q&A. So does your organization work with municipalities on things like plastic bag bans?
Yes, we have people who advise the municipalities. Most of our kind of advocacy people are at the federal and state level, but we work really closely with the different municipalities in order to help them figure out what the impact will be, how to implement it, and just kind of provide them research. One of the things in that one slide where we showed the three things, the education and research, or I think that education and research is like, if someone in a local municipality is like, I care about this issue, but I need to teach other people about it, we provide them the resources so that they have the information, they have the background and the expertise in order to really speak to it knowledgeably, which I think is really important. You can speak from authority.
With how much plastic is being made, do you think there will ever be a time where plastic becomes obsolete?
I don't know. That's a great question. I mean, the problem with plastic is that it is super useful. Like, it changed the world. Like, you can do so much with plastic. I mean, we use it in everything, that we're holding and looking at right now is plastic in it. From where I'm sitting right now, no, but I also don't have any expertise to speak on that. There could be some new polymer, some natural something that people are creating right now that, much smarter scientists are creating. And I think, not having any idea how to answer that, I think also kind of speaks to that everything that seemed permanent in the world was until it wasn't. Everything that seemed like there's no way it could ever change, it felt that way until someone changed it. And so I can say right now, yeah, we're always going to have plastic because in my life we always have. But, there are people who are working on ways to make cleaner things all the time. And I hope, obviously I hope they succeed.
Great, thank you. So how is the data of deterioration collected?
That I don't actually have a great answer for. Like, I I don't know. I know there are people who study that, who understand the way it breaks down. I know the data that we have of actually collecting things, but that is a great question. I will ask the people at the Alliance where, how that is all figured out. And I can email someone that answer.
No worries, and thank you.
I
What
could
are
make
the
something up,
most
but
effective ways to reduce plastic waste in daily life?
that's a great question. It's stuff like not using plastic utensils when you get takeout. It is stuff like using a reusable thing, like this. I drink tea and coffee out of it every morning and should wash it at some point, I think. But it's stuff like that. It is, you go to the store and there are the kind of reusable tote bags that you can buy when you buy groceries. And those are really helpful. Like, plastic bags are super easy. They're light, they're great. You don't have to lug your own bags around, but it's little things. It's little, not even inconveniences, but, just kind of be cognizant of how much plastic you're using. There's nothing we can do. There's plastic in our computers. We're not going to throw away our computers or phones. There's plastic in a lot of things that we use that we can't do anything about, but it's a single-use plastics that really add up so much. So bring your own water bottle, bring your own bag, use your own utensils. I don't do this in my personal life, but if you go to like a fast food place, I just thought it's not like, you can bring a fork. I think one of the biggest impediments to reducing things is sometimes stopping being afraid of looking goofy. Like, you see someone bring out their own fork at, McDonald's and you're like, oh, that guy's not a goofball, but then there's nothing being thrown away. So I think just being aware of, especially the single-use plastics that you use and being able to say, there's an alternative here that makes more sense. It takes an extra 30 seconds to think about, but that 30 seconds can make a difference.
Wonderful. So this is more of a what if scenario. So if you had an unlimited budget to fund an organization to help with pollution, what would you do with it?
Buy a yacht. Oh, but you mean like something positive? I think, well, that's a really interesting question because I think the unlimited budget would be to educate communities about the ways that they can reduce plastic, stuff like we talked about, the garbage cans, the X-flow nets, the things along the actual water system, along the sewers, the grates, and fund those. I think you would also want to fund alternatives to plastic. That'd be pretty cool. Again, I don't know what those are right now. So yeah, fund alternatives to plastic, help communities kind of learn what they can do and give them the budget to do so. And I think, yeah, just like educating people about the dangers of plastic, it's not an issue that people think about. There are a lot of things to think about right now. There are a million things to think about, but this is something that's pervasive and everywhere. And I think just, you know, one of the great things, like I'm old enough to remember when recycling was like this weird niche thing that was kind of like, oh, people recycle, but then it became part of daily life and people started to get more educated about it. And there were commercials about it and, famous people talked about it. And now, everyone does. And it's automatic. You have your recycling bin and you have your garbage and you separate it. And it's stuff like that that I think once people recognize like, oh, I don't have to use this plastic fork. I have a million forks in my drawer. Why would I get one of these? So yeah, there's stuff to do on the societal level and there's stuff to do that just changes individuals' minds. And I think, the combination of those makes a huge difference.
How do biodegradable plastics differ from traditional plastics in terms of environmental impacts?
They biodegrade faster. Um, like I think we saw on that slide, there was the kind of plastic takeout carrier versus like the plastic bottle caps, which are much smaller than the takeout carrier, but the one, that's 50 to 80 years. That's good, if it's in like a landfill or, somewhere safe. If it's in the water, it's not like better or worse, it's still bad, but they break down quicker into microplastics. So, it biodegrades, which is great, but then it becomes these smaller plastics even quicker. Like we said, the fish isn't going to eat the big plastic container, but once it starts breaking down and biodegrading, that stuff is still there. It's degraded, but it's definitely not, biological, and it's still really harmful.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So what are the economic costs related to plastic pollution cleanup and prevention efforts?
I don't have numbers for that. I'm sorry, I didn't anticipate that question. I don't have the key numbers for that at all. It's part of the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. I know does a lot of that. So I will look into that and I will send an email to the organizer. So it's a lot. But it's, from what I understand, it's not overwhelming. There are these kind of low cost ways to prevent it. The cleanup is harder once it actually gets in there. So prevention is the economic way to do things rather than, wait until it's too late, obviously.
No worries, and thank you.
Yeah.
I think one final question.
Mhm.
Do you notice that once a beach gets cleaned up, it stays clean longer?
That's a great question. I think so. I know when I've done beach cleanups, people always ask what you're doing because, you're walking around picking up garbage and with a plastic bag, and you're like, oh, I'm picking up garbage, and you get into conversation. You're like, oh my gosh, yeah, look at these bottle caps, and then the person starts to think, ooh, I drop stuff all the time. I think people seeing a clean beach are less likely, if you're in a parking lot or like a dirty parking garage and you drop something, you're like, oh, I'm in a parking garage. What difference does it make? If you're on a clean beach, it does make a difference. You think this beach is really nice. I'm not going to be the jerk who, throws my spoon everywhere. I don't have any data to back that up, but just from talking to people and just from my own personal experience, yeah, something that looks nice, you want to keep nice. Something that doesn't, you think, well, I'm not doing anything worse. So.
Thank you. I know we said we have our last question, but I actually just do you believe that there should be a level of accountability to those who pollute? Like, should they have some punishment ensued to them, or what do you think about that?
Like on an individual level, like a person throwing.
Yes, like an individual.
I think that an actual like person throwing something away, that'd be really hard to have like accountability. And also, people don't always know that it's the wrong thing to do. And so you might be punishing ignorance rather than promoting goodness. I think if you kind of talk more about pollution, people know more about it, there's a level of social, opprobrium that will be enough of a punishment. As for like major polluters, yes, I think they should have accountability. And I think we're done. Or everyone just disappeared. Is anyone still here? I think we might have X'd out. Oh, hi.
No, we're still here. Sorry, we just had to relocate real quick.
Yeah.
Okay. So honestly, if there's any other questions, if anybody has any other questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&As. If not, I think that wraps up all of our Q&A and our questions. But we just wanted to really just say thank you again and give you another round of applause because you had a really great presentation. And honestly, we know this is your first year, so we really hope that you'll come back maybe next year into the future. You'll come back. And yeah, we just really wanted to say thank you, and we really appreciate you coming in, answering all these questions very thoroughly, and we really appreciate it.
No, this is so cool. Thank you so much. I'd love to be back. I really admire all the stuff that you're doing. I think it's really cool and important. So yeah, good luck with everything.
All right, thank you so much. It was very nice to meet you and
Awesome.
speak with you today.
Meet y'all. Take care.
The rest of your day.
Yes, have a great rest of your day.
You. Thank you.